frightening movies. I really didn't watch much of them, but okay.
Okay, folks on YouTube, we'll be starting our podcast really shortly. We're just getting things set up here, so hang on. Okay, Facebook, why aren't you letting me go live? There we are. And welcome to the What's Cooking Podcast here on the Grill Live 365 Online Radio. This is journalist Charles W. Kim, and I'm joined by journalist Nicole M. Wells. She's in the Garden State of New Jersey, and I'm in the Sunshine State in Orlando, Florida. Hope your week is going well. And we got some stuff to talk about this week. We're both journalists, and we've been in the news game for a bit, and things are starting to get a little spicy with the President Trump taking his case to the Supreme Court. Kind of a Hail Mary at this point. So we thought that it would be important if we talk about the election constitutionally and what this could all mean. It's an important election, and meanwhile you have Joe Biden preparing for the transition, and a lot has been made about the dates and deadlines and things, and we're going to get into all that. But right now, how's it going, Nicole?
It's going pretty good, Charlie. It's going pretty good. It's cold. It's very cold. As my car battery can attest, it decided it was going to finally die. So, it's good. But pop a new battery in and we should be good to go. But yeah, we got a little bit of snow the other day.
Well, your car has been going for quite a long time on that, so.
Yeah, I finally decided it was going to give up. That was it. It was its last hurrah. So, um, yeah. But we got some snow flurries the other day, so that was nice.
Yeah, that's always good. That's always
Yeah, it's
good.
pretty.
Christmas time, seeing a little bit of snow coming around.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is your take on what's going on? Texas filed a lawsuit against Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Georgia, and of course, those
Mm-hmm.
are the four key swing states that things have to kind of happen with. They represent 62 electoral votes um, for anything to happen for Trump to remain in office. This is what has to happen. So, what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, my thought, I mean, I think it's very interesting. When I first heard about it, I thought it was very interesting. Texas is kind of leading the charge here in terms of, what's legal, what isn't. The whole mess of this election kind of revolves around, legalities, legal votes versus non-legal votes. Whether these states play by the rules in terms of, holding, legal elections, whether they were in line with the Constitution. So I think it's interesting that Texas is kind of, leading the charge there because they've always kind of done their own thing. So they're actually being joined, I think, by it's either 17 or 19 other states at this point.
It may be
Um,
up to 19 other states at
yeah.
this point, but as of this morning, it was at least 17
Hmm.
other states that had joined the fray.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there, but it's interesting. I mean, I've seen people calling them these states online like the Freedom Coalition. It's interesting to see where this goes, and in terms of whether or not the Supreme Court is actually going to take it up, and hear this and decide something. So it's kind of this election's version of Bush versus Gore. So.
Well, actually, it's funny that you bring that up, uh, the Bush versus Gore, because that has a lot to do with what's happening here. Um, the case with Bush versus Gore is always about ballots being treated the same.
Hmm.
One county to another, one state to another. There has to be equal treatment of the
Hmm.
ballots. And this new suit in Texas. Now, first of all, there is a suit in Pennsylvania, and a lot was made about this suit being thrown out. That this suit was being dismissed. That's not true. What the state Supreme Court in Pennsylvania did was they turned around and what they did is they refused to hear, or they refused an injunctive relief that would have started that would have blocked the state from naming its electors. As of
Hmm.
today, all 50 states have certified their election results, which means this ends up in this way. We titled this episode Trump's Hail Mary.
Hmm.
It's kind of a lob into the end zone, and hopefully there's a receiver there to catch it um, if he is to remain president. Um, we also had YouTube come out yesterday, and for those of you watching on YouTube, oh, by the way, if you're watching, whether it's YouTube, on Facebook, or wherever, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell. We come to you once a week with our news analysis and opinion. Um, what was I saying before all that? Oh,
YouTube.
what's that?
YouTube.
YouTube came out yesterday and put out guidelines saying that you basically cannot conflate the issue of Trump believing the election was stolen with any type of uh, fraud or problems with the balloting. That it's okay to say that there are affidavits and there are charges of voter irregularities and things, and it's okay to say that Trump feels the election was stolen. You just can't conflate the two, or YouTube will remove your video. So we're not going to go down either of those roads. So what
Well,
we
we're not, but the point must be made that it's just absolutely ridiculous that in the United States of America in 2020 there are things you can't say, because for fear of censorship by someone. That's absurd. That's just absolutely absurd. People are entitled to their opinions, right, wrong, or indifferent, good, bad, or ugly. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. And they're allowed to say it. Just because it offends you doesn't mean they have any less right to say it. And if you're, quite honestly, my opinion is, if you're too gullible and too stupid to sit there and do your own research and figure it out for yourself, what is or isn't true, you deserve to believe whatever somebody wants to sell you. But here we are in 2020 not being able to say whatever we want to say. It's just
yeah,
my
and there's a whole another issue with that. Trump says that he will veto the National Defense Act, which supports the military, unless a provision is put in there to either to repeal, to get rid of Section 230, which gives Facebook, Google, YouTube, and these big tech companies protections that publishers of newspapers and like CNN, broadcast organizations, radio and television all don't have. They could be sued if they say something that defames you or libels you. They can be sued. Under Section 230, Facebook, YouTube, and such are not considered publishers, but kind of a platform and a pass through where they are not civilly liable, legally liable, if they get something wrong, or if one of the people on the platform gets something wrong. Um,
which it should be. They shouldn't have those protections. I mean, I'm still banned from my Twitter account. I still don't have access to my Twitter account because, I said something that offended someone. Some power that be at Twitter took offense to something I said, and I'm still locked out of my account. I mean, if I remove the tweet, if I censor myself and I remove the tweet, although they'll only be too happy to let me back in, but I'm not doing it because that's just wrong. I shouldn't have to be censored to get back into my own account. So yeah, they do act like publishers very much, and they shouldn't have those protections. They should be gone, every one of them.
I agree. Uh, but let's start out with, first of all, we're up against several deadlines in the election that are coming up. I believe on the 14th, in just a couple days from now, there will be a meeting in the state legislatures to assign electors, and
Mm-hmm.
those electors will cast their votes, and then they in each state, and then those votes will be taken, tallied, and they will be taken to a joint session of Congress on January 6th, where they'll be counted and officially certified, and then the winner is inaugurated on January 20th.
Mm-hmm.
So now, and there's been a lot of talk about this. Of course, the media, more around a month ago, I think it was about a month ago, maybe a little less, declared Joe Biden the president elect. And he's even had, he's fundraising off it. He's got his little sign out there, Office of the President elect.
Which isn't legal. None of it is.
Well, I wouldn't say it's not legal. It's
But
a
he's
tradition.
not
It's a
legally certified.
tradition during the transition. Trump did it. I mean, that's what got Michael Flynn in trouble, right? Is that during this transitionary period between the election and January 20th, and even I think even before the electors met in December, is when Flynn allegedly had his conversation with the Russian Kislyak, saying to Russia basically, "Hey, we got sanctions against you, but don't. Obama's got sanctions against you, but don't do anything rash until we get in office." And
Well,
that was the whole conversation that he was busted on,
yeah.
supposedly for lying to the FBI. But
And it'll
and they were trying to charge him with the Logan Act, which meant that he was representing the country when he was not authorized to do so. But
well,
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it'll be interesting to see if anybody in, President-elect Biden's team gets charged with doing the same thing. Although actually, technically, Biden's people should have already been charged with that with all of the China ties with him and his family. But anyhow,
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's really funny. It's really funny. Here they have Michael Flynn, a general, who was an acting security advisor for then President elect Trump. And actually, we can't say that because he wasn't actually president elect, but tradition had it. He won the election. Hillary conceded, so president elect. Um, and he could call himself that, and he started his transition and have his team. Biden has said publicly since this kind of declaration by the U.S. media that he won the election and he's president elect, that he has spoken to foreign leaders. And the funny thing is, yeah, I mean, Joe Biden, yeah,
I love it.
I come up with the rules, I blame them for breaking the rules, and then I break the rules too, and I tell you all about it because I've lost my mind.
Well, I mean, he told us he put together the most extensive voting fraud
Organization in history.
in this history of the U.S. I mean, he told us it was perfect.
And it's like some people say this about Trump, but I think it's more akin to Biden. He says the quiet part out loud. He's the one on video, and the funny thing is, Biden is the one, according to Susan Rice's notes of the meeting with Obama, where they discussed Michael Flynn. Biden's the one who said, hey, what about the Logan Act? Because the Logan Act, which has never been successfully prosecuted in the United States history, I mean, you have to remember, and we're going to get into this with the inauguration date and other things, people don't know what they think they know about our history and the Constitution and how things are supposed to work. They really, really don't do it. And I think the ignorance we can place at the feet of academia. I mean, the young people today who are saying some of the things they're saying and voting the way they're voting, they're low information voters. I'm sorry, I don't care if you're in college. You're a low information voter. They've educated the intelligence right out of you, basically.
Well, that was done before they got to college.
To an extent, but even worse in college. It just continues.
I mean, college is like like high school these days. I mean, since everybody goes to college, it doesn't mean anything anymore. If you actually want to impress somebody, you have to get a master's or higher. So,
but
college is like high school.
Right. But all that aside, people don't know. Now, thankfully, when I went to school in upstate New York, very small high school, we only had like 73 people in our senior class. We had, and I'm going to give him kudos, the late William Farley, Wild Bill Farley. And he did our history and civics. And we had to pass a state mandated Regents test in New York State on civics. And part of that whole class was learning about the Constitution, the creation of the country, the key Supreme Court decisions and what they meant and why they were important. And he did a phenomenal job. At my junior year in high school, I mean, I'm looking at what people are saying now. And it's like, my goodness, man, you didn't have a decent education in high school about the basics of our nation's founding?
No, they didn't.
So, are you ready? Are you ready for my primer?
All right, let's get edumacating.
Educate.
Here we go.
Okay, now most of us understand that there are three branches of government. Three.
Wait, no. Most of us.
Three.
AOC not included.
Well, she has the intellectual agility of a small soap dish, so. Three. Legislative, which is made up of the U.S. Senate and Congress, and the House of Representatives. Together, they are Congress. They, under the Constitution, basically create the laws, come up with the ideas and create the laws, and control the most important thing in the world is the money. A lot of people are under this false assumption when Biden's going to come in and he's going to do this and he's going to executive order this and executive order that because Trump and. Nah. He still needs Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, or Chuck Schumer, depending what happens in Georgia, and maybe Kamala Harris to sign on to whatever he wants to do financially to get the money to do X, Y, or Z. Everything he says, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. No, you ain't doing squat if Nancy Pelosi says no. Look at what just happened with the COVID relief.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what just happened. Pelosi and the Democrats were holding out for $2.4 trillion. The Republicans initially wanted to be under $1 trillion, $900 billion for the fourth COVID relief. So what happens? They're deadlocked. And the deadlock was mainly that Pelosi wanted additional, I won't say additional money. She would argue with me with that. And I don't want to argue with that old bat because I'd smack her silly.
No, Fancy Nancy, we don't want no arguments there.
Then her dentures would be all over the place. It'd be nasty.
It's kind of a mess, yeah.
But what she wanted is that, and she said this publicly, so I'm not making this up. This isn't fake news. She says it. She has an interview with Wolf Blitzer and others, and basically she didn't want to see President Trump put his name on a check that went out before the election. So anybody who was hurting financially prior to the election could go pound salt. If you lost your unemployment benefits and your business closed or whatever, go pound salt. Because she didn't want to give Trump any kind of win. Because Trump had offered $1.8 trillion that he would support and that he would get the Republicans in the Senate to support that would do all these things. But Pelosi wants more. She wants to bail out states like New York and your home state of New Jersey, which have been financially run incompetently for the last several decades. By both Republicans. In fairness, by both Republicans and Democrats.
Oh yeah, fiscally plundered.
And now it's like $30 billion in the hole. So Pelosi wants to cover that shortfall in states like New York and New Jersey that have been run very badly. And that's where Trump and her have kind of had this impasse, where Steve Mnuchin, who's the negotiator for the White House. And
it comes down to never waste a good crisis.
Never waste a good crisis, as Rahm Emanuel said. But that's what was holding, that's why Pelosi couldn't get anything done prior to the election. Or let's say wouldn't get anything done prior to the election. And people could just go eat ice cream.
Well, like Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake.
Yeah. So now she's all excited, like a giddy little schoolgirl.
It's been a long time, so
back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. She's a giddy little schoolgirl over this offer of around $900 billion that the Republican Mitch McConnell said that they'd be likely to support. Well, I don't know what school. Maybe Nancy took Common Core in school, but last time I checked, $900 billion is about half of what President Trump was offering her.
Yeah, but it's all about optics.
Yeah, but you still got to explain to me how 1.8 trillion bad because Orange Man, and 900 billion good because no Orange Man.
Because the hate in these people's hearts and minds has so atrophied and shrunk their brains to the point of it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it actually is more or it is less money. That's not the point. The point is that he didn't notch a win in getting out, unemployment benefits, stimulus checks, etc. That's the point. So, I mean, it's scorched earth, win at all costs. And that's where they're at. That's where they've been at for at least 4 years.
Yeah, even I would say even longer.
Oh, I would argue longer too, but I'm just saying at least the 4 years he's been in office.
So anyway, there are these three branches, and we just went into kind of that tangent to show you how important the House of Representatives and the Senate are, no matter who's president.
I mean, like the kind of the way I think of it is the House is like the kids' table, and the Senate is like the grown-ups' table. The kids' table comes to the grown-ups' table with their propositions, and the grown-ups say, well, we'll approve it, we won't approve it. We don't really care what you did, but, if we think it's okay, we'll pass it too. So that's kind of the way I think of it.
Well, you see, I think that's the way it used to be before, I believe, the 17th Amendment, which is another, great move we made in the early, or maybe the 19 teens, 1911-ish. But basically what happened was, in the Constitution, the original founding documents, United States senators were appointed. The two senators from each state were appointed by the individual state legislatures.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is that you didn't want to leave. The House of Representatives was popular vote based on population, and there were more members. The Senate only has 100 members with equal representation of the states. Mm-hmm. And what they were supposed to be, and again, I mean, we have to look at reality. Everybody, oh, no, it's not fair. And yeah, there was a time in American history where basically the common citizens were maybe not as well educated as the people serving in the Senate. And they were kind of there as a check on the House, that the House would move bills and legislation based on popular whim of the moment. Mm-hmm. But the Senate was supposed to be this wise, appointed, deliberative body. Mm-hmm. That was not beholden to the voters, but could look at the things coming from the House of Representatives and say, is this reasonable? Mm-hmm. Or is this just some knee-jerk reaction to something, and maybe we ought to think about it a little deeper in terms of the country and moving the country forward? Well, somewhere around the late 1800s, early 1900s, this amendment comes into play, and U.S. senators now can be elected, directly elected by the populace. So now, senators are basically no better than the folks in the House, who run for election every 2 years and have to be really kind of moving with the political winds.
Well, that wasn't really my point. I mean, yes, I agree with all of that. That was kind of, the way things worked. But my point was that, the House can do whatever the House, wants to do. But the House ain't getting nowhere with anything if the Senate does not agree with it. That's right. My point, is that, the House can sit there and pass whatever pie in the sky resolution, bill, whatever they want. But, until the Senate approves it, takes it up and approves it, it's not happening. So that's my point.
Right. But they also have, but it's also the other way too. The Senate can't come up with stuff and blow it by the House. Both have to reconcile, both have to compromise, and both have to agree.
Yeah, but it seems like, from just kind of my own anecdotal, just kind of watching what comes out of the House and what comes, out of the Senate, it just seems like more fanciful, shall we say, stuff comes out of the House that goes to the Senate and then it's shot down than the other way around.
Yeah, well, the Green New Deal, for example.
Oh, yes, that would be a poster child.
Right, but this is what I mean when I say that the House is more blowing into blowing into political winds
Yes.
than the Senate. I mean, that's the other reason why the senators are serve a term of 6 years. The House of Representatives serves 2 years.
Yeah. So
The
there's more continuity in the Senate.
right, and the House is there to have the pulse on the people for
Hmm.
the day to day.
Yes.
It's kind of like weather and climate. Okay, weather is what happens today, rain, sun, whatever. Climate is longer trend.
Hmm.
So the Senate is there to look at the longer trend.
Yeah.
And is this legislation coming forward good for the longer trend of the nation? And they're more deliberative. That's why they have things like the filibuster and these things. They were supposed to be a really tight, deliberative unit.
Hmm.
But since Americans decided to make them, accountable to voters, as opposed to state. And the other thing too is that the other reason state legislatures were to appoint the Senate when they were crafting the country, when the documents for the country in the Constitution, was it was actually the senators who were there to make sure that their state's interests were being protected,
Hmm.
as relayed to them by the state legislatures, making the state legislatures much more important than we believe or they may be today.
Yeah.
Now, all this also comes into play when we talk about presidential politics. When we talk about how a president is elected, it's not popular vote. It is by a set of electors, and the electors are chosen 100% at the discretion, according to the Constitution, by the state legislatures. Now, most states have decided over time to award their electors to whoever wins the popular vote in that state. They can be all the votes going to one candidate, or there are a couple states now that actually break it up. But that's the thing is that um, the state legislatures have the final decision and are solely responsible for the elected to choose in whatever manner they see fit the electors to go to Washington and cast their ballots for president.
Hmm.
And there are a couple reasons why this all doesn't happen like in 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days. Now, the other thing too is you have to remember is that travel was much tougher when our founding documents came about. If you won an election in November, it might take you weeks or months to get to Washington, depending on where you lived in the United States.
Hmm.
I mean, even today, taking the auto train from Washington down to Florida is an overnight experience. It's 17 to 21 hours, even in 2020.
Yeah. There's only so much you can make up for, you know?
And as a matter of fact, and the reason I know this is because my birthday falls on January 20th on Inauguration Day. So I'm kind of into the history of it a little bit. But it wasn't until Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1933, he was the first president inaugurated on January 20th.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, prior to that, the inauguration of the president took place closer to your birthday on March 4th, almost a full 2 months later.
Yeah, because it would have taken that much time for travel and, I mean, imagine you're traveling by horse and carriage. I mean, if you're going through mud and that mud freezes, I mean, you're stuck for a little while until you
Right.
can dig it out and get back on the road. And yeah, took a while.
So yeah, we've amended the Constitution, but both the March 4th and the January 20th are kind of arbitrary dates in
Yeah,
that
they are.
in that there is no reason. If, for instance, if we really think there were problems with this election, as the Supreme Court weighs in that they feel there are problems with this election, and we're going to get into the specifics of the Texas case shortly, but this primer is needed. You have to understand how this works. But there is no legitimate reason that we have. I mean, we have a constitutional amendment that says it, but given COVID, the Supreme Court could give leave and say, well, because of the exceptional nature of this year and the pandemic, we're going to hold off the inauguration till March 4th, as had been done in the past.
Yeah, they very well could.
And maybe even have a new election in the meantime to try to smooth over irregularities that happened in November. Because it is so disputed, so contested, that maybe that would be the way to solve it.
Well, didn't they, if I remember correctly, did Florida re-vote in Bush versus Gore?
No.
They didn't. They just
No.
recounted.
They just recounted.
Okay.
And at
All
a
right.
certain point, the Supreme Court basically said, okay, enough of the recounting.
Mm-hmm.
We're done.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember if they re-voted as well, but okay.
No, but conceivably, we certainly between now and say March 4th, and again, that is also an arbitrary date. It could be, we could say February 28th, we could say June 5th. It doesn't matter. We could have another election. And we could tighten up whatever protocols were violated this time around and perfect the vote that was supposedly taken in November. Now, why do I say that? Oh, come on. Of course, this was the most honest, secure election ever in history. Somehow, that had the least number of ballots being thrown out. Even in the primary, months before, in many states, disqualified votes, percentage-wise, were in the double digits. In one case during the primary in New Jersey, as much as 1 in 5 votes were being thrown out at their first crack at mail-in voting.
Yeah, like everything in Jersey was doing a bang-up job. Let me tell you, unemployment, vote by mail. Yep. Mm-hmm.
But okay, so double digits. Somehow, miraculously, the votes thrown out during the general election with, oh, by the way, percentage-wise, the highest voter turnout since like 1912.
Mm-hmm.
A record number, 160 million people actually casting their ballots.
Yeah.
Less than 1% of the votes were disqualified.
Isn't that something? Look at us go.
Ain't that something? Now,
amazing.
Also, interestingly, and this came up on Life, Liberty, and Levin on the Fox network this weekend.
You mean the one that's falling and falling and falling in ratings as we speak?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But interesting, they had a professor on who said that Biden's victory is definitely historic. Implausible, but historic. Biden lost 3, I think it was Ohio, Iowa, and maybe Texas. 3 bellwethers that every president known to man, and 40, 45 times or whatever, we've had elections for president. Every president has won those 3 states.
And yet somehow he lost all 3.
He lost all 3 and won the presidency.
Wow. Amazing.
With the highest vote total of any presidential candidate winner in history. Well, he outperformed Obama, but he only outperformed Obama in certain states.
But you know why, right?
You can tell me.
Because 2020. That's why.
That's why.
That's why. Yeah, that's that covers all multitude of sins. Because it's 2020. Yep.
COVID, because of COVID. So,
Yeah.
so he also lost 18 of 19 matrices that other winning presidents for years have had. And that includes voter enthusiasm, party registration, victory margin in the primary, even silly things like people choosing cookies that look like the candidate or whatever. Or
Yes. I have heard about that cookie phenomenon.
the cookies and Google search results.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Biden lost 18 of 19 bellwethers to Trump. Or Trump won 18 of 19 bellwethers and the 3 bellwether states and had the highest vote total ever for an incumbent president running for re-election at 74 million and change and lost.
Utterly amazing.
And
But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. It's also the first time that a winning, challenging president, in this case Biden, brought absolutely zero coattails with him. As a matter of fact, in the House of Representatives, in all 27 contested districts across the country, the Democrats lost them all.
Amazing.
They lost, which is probably now up to maybe 10 or 12 seats.
I believe it's 12 at last count.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In the Senate, the Democrats picked up one whopping seat. That was the extent of Biden's coattails.
I'd say they got tailored pretty short.
Yeah. To non-existent. And the funny thing is, and like this analysis said on the show I was watching, and I thought was interesting, is if you maybe some of these things, I mean, is this all possible? Well, anything's possible.
Is it probable?
He used the term implausible. That if you took someone of an objective mind and you just put out these facts, these are the bellwethers that every president ever during the election has won.
Mm-hmm.
Trump won every one of these except one. Who do you think won the election?
Trump?
No!
Just a shot in the dark.
And it makes things really interesting because, you know, we are told, you know, this is what happened. Nothing to see here, folks.
Move along.
But really, you expect people who supposedly, and you know, a lot of my folks on the left kind of like to rub your nose in the fact of how highly educated they are and college degrees they have out the wazoo and how they're into critical thinking and they know all kinds of ad hominem and whatever. Your argument is faulty because it's an ad hominem straw man. Stand on your head, do a dance.
I'd like to see that part.
Yeah. So. But there's a great line in Jaws. If any of you have seen the movie Jaws.
Here we go. Get ready, guys.
Quint is a salty sea captain, and Matt Hooper, and played by Robert Shaw. And Richard Dreyfuss plays Hooper, the college kid, rich kid with the yacht, who has all the equipment and stuff, and going after the shark. And Quint has his fish on the line, and Hooper's like, it's not a shark. It's not a shark. And eventually it turns out it was a shark. And at one point Quint says to Hooper, you know, don't you tell me my business again. And Hooper says, Quint, that doesn't prove anything, Quint says. Proves one thing: you rich college boys don't have enough education to admit when you're wrong. And I think that's what we're seeing here. I mean, I think if you took a bunch of these folks and just put them in a room and they didn't know anything about what you were going to tell them, and you put these facts in front of them, they would say Donald Trump won the election.
Mm-hmm.
Objectively, evidentially, it's just there. And how another candidate could score more votes, and oh, by the way, in just in key states, that they wouldn't look at that with any amount of suspicion. Oh my goodness. When 2016, when Donald Trump won, remember, Russian asset.
Mm-hmm.
The election was stolen from Hillary because of Trump's collusion with Russia. It was all Russian bots on, that spent $100,000 on Facebook that changed the course of the election in 2016. We heard that for 3 years.
Yeah.
And we don't have, like in Georgia, where there's video evidence which appear. Now, let's give this poll worker the benefit of the doubt. We weren't there. We don't know. But there's a poll worker in that Georgia video. I mean, aside from the ballots coming out from under the table when people had left, and they continued counting after saying they were shutting down for the night, which ABC News verified because they put out a tweet that night that the voting was canceled because of a water main break, which turned out to be a leaky toilet. And they were shutting.
That works.
Yeah, it was a leaky toilet, but apparently they got a call after they sent everybody out. Oh, we'll keep counting and whatnot, and then that's when supposedly these containers of ballots were brought out from under a table and the counting resumed. Although the media and some poll watchers were not there. There is another person.
Well, that smells very legit.
There's another person in that video who looks like, with the video evidence, that she takes a stack of ballots, straightens them, runs them through the machine, straightens them again, runs them through the machine, straightens them again, and runs them through the machine. Now, in all fairness, we don't know.
Well, I mean,
we've all had our problems with office machines. Making a copy or whatever. It's very possible she took them, straightened them, and tried to run them through the first time, and the machine said error or whatever. Okay, so she took them and straightened them, put it through a second time, and said error, and the third time was the charm, and it counted them.
It could have been, or it could have also been, I mean, we're always being told to vote early and vote often, so
that was the often part.
It could be that too.
We don't know.
We're not experts here. Who's to say?
But the thing is that when you see this stuff, and anyone who questions it or has any suspicion over how this election unfolded, is labeled, censored, shut off, whatever. Yet 4 years ago, there was all manner of conspiracy theories. The one guy on MSNBC, oh, Trump's been a Russian asset since 1987.
Because that sounds plausible. And they talk about crazy theories going around now. I mean, that's probably the kookiest I've heard.
I would like to do a meme with Trump's face on like James Bond. Donald Trump, Russian assets since 1987. Double agent. Do-do-do-do.
I could see that. I could totally see that.
Him hanging off of skyscrapers and things. And
yeah.
Betting all the babes. Well, betting all the babes, probably. I'm sure he did that.
Hanging off the buildings he built, I could see it.
In the arms of a Russian seductress. And, yeah.
Pretty sure Melania would not be okay with that, but
It's all right. It'll be beautiful. It'll
it'd be
be
beautiful.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Tremendous.
but anyway, okay. So we have the election results are what they are. So, but the problem is in Pennsylvania, and this is one of the key states. Again, there are four: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia. The problem, and they represent 62 electoral votes. If you take away those votes, then Joe Biden is lacking the 270. So the one case in Pennsylvania, which got a lot of attention, which was brought, says in the Pennsylvania state constitution, there are only two ways that you can cast a ballot. Two. One, two. In person, of course, or through an absentee ballot with excuses. Or as we say, with reasons. But as far as but then we have the Republican legislature in Pennsylvania in the fall of 2019 passing this law expanding mail-in voting. The problem is they had to go through a process and amend the state constitution in order to do that. They just can't write a law, pass it through the state legislature, have the governor sign it, and have it happen. It requires a state constitutional amendment, which means they had to pass the law, the governor had to sign it, it had to appear in every county in the state newspapers for a period of time, and then go on the public ballot as a referendum in the general election, which would have been this November, before being ratified and could not be used until the next election cycle.
That's a corner we needed to cut. I mean,
it's a pretty big corner that ends up getting cut. It's called Act 77. So the Trump campaign filed suit, and a state judge said that this case is likely to win on the merits, on the actual facts of the case, that they violated their own state constitution to change the voting laws, meaning that all the votes that were sent by mail-in are void. They're illegally, under Pennsylvania state law and the Constitution, those votes are illegal. Period. End of discussion. Are not legally cast. Let's word carefully here.
Yes, we can't anger the powers that be.
So, the Trump campaign put into the state Supreme Court, based on this judge's opinion in one of the state courts. They went to the state Supreme Court and asked for an injunction on certifying the electors for the state. The Supreme Court refused to grant the injunction and stop the certification. The case, again, on the merits, was not dismissed or thrown out. The motion for injunctive relief was denied. Well, if you go on social media, Trump's case was thrown out of Pennsylvania. No, it wasn't. Number one.
Well, it's all in the details.
Number one. But now what's happened with this Texas case is Texas, in filing the case, is like, wait a minute, Pennsylvania. You mean to tell me you violated your own state constitution, allowing more votes than the Constitution allows in the way they were cast? Well, that's not fair. And that's not fair to us. And because you did that, now you're disenfranchising our voters. So we have a problem. And other states have joined. And what they've come to find out, and what they're challenging now, is in these other states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia, did they do the same thing? Did
Mm-hmm.
they violate their own state's constitution? Now, the problem, as pointed out by actually, even though the state judge in Pennsylvania said you're very likely to win on the merits of this,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the truth is the truth.
Yeah.
You violated your own constitution or you didn't, and
Yeah, it's one or the other.
one
Very
or the other,
simple.
right?
Yeah.
I forgot where I was going with that. I'm just getting old and senile like Biden here.
Not quite. I don't think you have a hairline fracture in your foot after playing with your dog. So,
But
the country's going down a great path.
but winning on the merits of that case, if the other states had did the same thing, the judge is where I was going with that. She said that providing relief legally could be very difficult because millions of people voted by mail, as per Act 77, this new law that was put through. So now, if you disallow those votes, you're disenfranchising several million voters. If you allow their votes to stand, you're disenfranchising millions of voters who showed up in person and did it the quote right unquote way with showing up in person or requesting an absentee with reasons.
Yeah.
It's kind of a no-win scenario.
Well, it's a no-win, but I mean, in my mind, it comes down to, did you follow the rules? No, you didn't. So, unfortunately, your bad decision cost these people their votes, but at the end of the day, you didn't follow the rules.
So now we have, and this translates to the other four states.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And 17 other states have now joined Texas in the lawsuit, and quite probably the Trump campaign will jump on board as well and join them.
I'm sure.
Now, this is the reason why this case is so important, even more so than the other case in Pennsylvania, whatever. All these other cases are first adjudicated at the state level, and then they kind of percolate up through the appeals process to the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a period of time.
Oh, yeah.
It's not something that happens overnight. Or
No.
within, it takes weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years for these cases to percolate up that high. We
Yep.
don't have that kind of time.
No.
If there was an injury, if damage was done during the election, this needs to be ratified now.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the thing is, with Texas, the Supreme Court has very few instances of what they call original jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, and if you listen to Will Chamberlain, who's a conservative attorney, he was on a podcast the other night with Tim Pool, Timcast IRL, and he said most of the time the Supreme Court tries to find way. They're basically really lazy.
They're a court of last resort.
But they always are looking, apparently, for ways of getting out of hearing cases.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, I don't think so either.
It's a case of we only want to hear the really, really, really important stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they do hear their share of stuff, but it's mostly, and again, it comes down to this original jurisdiction where the Supreme Court is there to settle disputes between the states. So New York versus New Jersey, Texas versus Pennsylvania. That's where the Supreme Court takes a look at things. And usually it's things like, waterway rights, things along that line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Very mundane, boring, mind-numbing stuff.
Depends on who you ask.
Which state has the authority on this particular waterway or on this piece of land, and blah, 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 blah. This, because it's state versus state, the court is going to have a harder time denying original jurisdiction. And it's already kind of a given that Texas has standing to sue, and these other states have standing. Because what happens, because Pennsylvania is one of the key states, and it could shape the way the election goes, these four states, that all the other states have an interest. Not so much, ironically, for the president, but for the vice president. Because the vice president sits as president pro tem of the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, especially if Georgia, if the two votes there go Democrat, Kamala Harris, the vice president, or Mike Pence, depending on which way things go,
Mm-hmm.
has the deciding vote. 50-50, the vice president casts the deciding vote.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as the U.S. Senate goes, all states could be impacted by the choice for vice president. So, even more so than Biden or Trump, the Harris Pence question, with the Senate being so close right now,
Mm-hmm.
may be enough of a bar high enough for the Supreme Court to take a look at the case.
Yeah.
And that's not even getting into the merits of what happened, where that happened, were there problems, were there not problems. Just on the basis of, and I think this is also the simplest case to either prove or disprove.
Well, I think that's in its favor. That I mean, you keep it simple, stupid. But not only that, I think that that Texas wouldn't be wasting its time if it didn't know that it had a fairly good shot of the court not of the court hearing it. Of the court not denying it. I think that I'm sure they have some very smart lawyers in Texas, and I don't think they'd be wasting their time filing directly with the Supreme Court if they didn't figure they had a pretty, damn good chance of being heard. So, yeah, it should be interesting.
Yeah, and so we'll see what develops. We'll see what
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Yeah.
Um, but it is a Hail Mary. There is I want to say a pretty heavy likelihood that Joe Biden will be inaugurated on January 20th. Because basically what happens is, let's say the Supreme Court rules against these states, then there's going to come one of three different solutions. The state legislatures, the decision for electors then kicks back to all the state legislatures. They can go with whoever won the popular vote, in this case, Joe Biden. They can send the electors for President Trump because the election was tainted and they want to send for Trump. Or these four states could send no electors because the vote was tainted. Let's say they do the final. And if they vote for Biden, send electors for Biden, he wins. If they send electors for Trump in all four states, he wins. If they send no electors, then neither candidate reaches 270. In which case, on January 6th, the decision is kicked to the House of Representatives. Now, if you look at the way it works is every state gets one vote. There are currently 24 states, or maybe it's 26. 26 states have majority Republican delegations. 23 majority Democrat. And I think one's like independent. So if the vote goes along, and again, they can vote any way they want to. It could be unanimous for Biden. I wouldn't hold my breath, but it could be unanimous for Trump. I don't think one Democrat in the world would ever do that, but It could. Or if it comes strictly along party lines, Republicans voting for Trump, Democrats voting for Biden, Trump wins 26-23.
Mm-hmm. Could be. We'll just have to wait and see.
Long shot, but we're not even talking about any allegations of whatever that might have happened. All we are saying, although the Texas and the states joining it are saying, is you four states violated your own constitutions to allow this mail-in voting fiasco. And now we have a presidential race that is contested because of it. So therefore, stuff's got to change. You know, whatever.
Yeah.
So it'd be a big decision by the Supreme Court. A huge decision.
Well, I mean, they've let me down so many times in the past. I'm not really holding my breath, but maybe, just maybe, they might get something right. We'll have to see.
And on that note, we do have to take a break. For those of you watching on YouTube, just hang tight. For those of you listening on Anchor FM, you'll hear our break and little commercial pop in here. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome to the second half of the What's Cooking podcast with journalists Charles W. Kim and Nicole M. Wells. I'm coming to you from the sunshine state of Orlando, Florida. She's up there in frigid Garden State of New Jersey.
Just keep rubbing it in.
So, we were just talking about the Supreme Court case that's been filed by Texas, which is really important. And what are your thoughts on all this?
I mean, you know, like I said, I think that it's important. You know, you can't just have states willy-nilly, you know, breaking the rules whenever they feel like it. Because in that case, you just have anarchy. So good for Texas. You know, good for Texas for leading the charge on, you know, holding states accountable that decided they were just going to do whatever, you know, anything goes for this election. You know, that everybody's hailing as historic. This is a historic election in terms of...
How dare you? How dare you? How dare you?
Okay, Greta, someone needs a smack and being sent to the room. But
Where'd you go?
I'm right here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Huh. Oh, I see. There we go. Wow. Okay.
Anyhow, so yeah, I mean, I think that you know, it's definitely a good thing, because otherwise you're going to have anarchy, you know, and like everyone's been hailing it as, you know, an historic election because of the turnout, you know, and I think that's because both sides saw it in apocalyptic terms, you know, and that's why both sides are fighting so hard, you know, to win it. But yeah, good for Texas, because you can't just have states deciding, you know, randomly, we're just not going to play by the rules that everyone else is playing by. So.
Well, now the question comes in is to kind of where do we go from here?
Supreme Court. That's where we go.
Well, I'm not talking just about the Supreme Court, but we have talked about the polarization of the country. I mean, no matter what happens, somebody is going to be sworn into office, most likely on January 20th. Like I said, though, I mean, the Supreme Court could come in and say, all right, look, we're making an exception this year. We're going to go back to March 4th this year, one time only to swear in the president, and we're going to do another election between now and then. They could.
They could.
To try to be as fair as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Joe Biden can pull 80 million votes out in November, he should be able to do it again in February.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically speaking, he should be able to.
You would think so, right?
You would think, yeah.
I mean, he pulled more votes and then Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, the greatest presidents in history. So,
well, I would scratch that last one, or excuse me, the first one. The last one was one of the greatest, but the first one you mentioned, that's up for debate. But anyhow,
I'm talking voter turnout.
Oh, so you didn't say that. Okay, all right.
I mean, if he could beat his predecessor president, outperform Barack Obama, I guess when you look at the numbers, this is one of the things I'm having the most problems with. You're telling me that Joe Biden outperformed the president he served under, Barack Obama.
Yeah, they're trying to get you to swallow impossible numbers.
Again, I wouldn't say impossible, implausible.
Fine, highly implausible numbers. Bizarre numbers. Is that better?
Bizarre, yeah. I think bizarre is an understatement, but
like bizarre numbers, okay.
But yeah, I have a hard time wrapping my brain around, especially when Trump overperformed by 12 million votes. He had let's say 11 million, 63 the first time around in 2016, and now it's up to 74 and change. Trump overperformed himself from 2016 by 11 million votes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. I mean, the left is so quick to say, well, Biden's up by 7 million votes, and that's a lot. Well, Trump overperformed himself by 11 million.
Mm-hmm.
So, how come none of this makes any sense? If you look at the election, it is definitely bizarre. It's definitely weird. And certainly you can make the argument that COVID and mail-in voting had something to do with that. But it's still weird.
Oh, yeah. Regardless, it's still weird.
And I actually think that all these different things like checking signatures and go back and recounting the votes, I would think the left would really want that super bad. Because if Biden's victory was, in fact, as big as is reported it was in both the popular vote and electoral college. Oh, and by the way, Joe Biden is also the only candidate in history to win the lowest percentage of counties in the country. He won 500 and change. There are like 3,000 some odd counties in the country. He won a fifth of them. Less than a fifth. 16.7% of the counties he won. He just happened to. Go ahead, what?
No, I think we talked about that in depth last week.
Right. And they were also the wealthiest counties, most populated counties in the country, and control 70% of the GDP. But, again, first candidate in history, he won the lowest number of counties. He won less counties than Hillary Clinton.
And she was one of the worst candidates they ever put up. The least liked.
He won less counties in the country, but overwhelmingly won the election. They say. According to CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, Fox, MSNBC, everybody, according to everybody.
It must be that new Common Core math.
Yeah.
We're just not on the up and up with that.
And you're also talking about a guy, and we said this before, who, maybe got 100 or 200 people at his rallies where Trump was pulling in thousands. And we're being told, don't look at the man behind the curtain. Don't look at
Nope.
don't comprehend what your own eyes and ears are telling you and proving to you. Just ignore it. Just listen to what we say. These are numbers. Yeah, they look kind of weird, but just
go with it.
Just trust us. It's okay.
Yep. Just go with it.
So, now we say this today. And meanwhile, by the way, a lot of folks are like, oh, they're so happy. They're dancing in the streets that Biden may actually be president. And they're saying that Trump is the worst man who was ever president, forever, all time. Well, the worst president ever today announced that Morocco in northern Africa, an Arab nation, is normalizing relations and recognizing the sovereignty of Israel. Which brings now to, what are we at, 4, 5, 6 Arab neighbors recognizing Israel for the first time in history.
Something like that.
Boy, yeah, that Trump, he's a horrible president. Bringing unprecedented peace to the Middle East. Horrifying.
Who asked him to do such a thing? I mean,
My
really.
God.
Who asked him to do it? Nobody told him he could go ahead and just willy-nilly make these peace deals. Come on now.
It's funny because when he first took office, he said he was putting Jared Kushner in charge of this and all. And but this will never work. No way. What does Kushner know? How could he possibly do anything in the Middle East that hasn't been done already? Wow. So we opened the Jewish embassy in Jerusalem. And we didn't just say we recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. We actually got a building, got it up to speed as an embassy within 6 months, under budget, massively under budget, and now brokered peace deals with several Arab neighbors who, for the first time in history since 1948, recognize the Israeli state's right to exist. But Joe Biden's going to bring us back so we're better on the world stage. Because until there's war in the Middle East and women and children and seniors are getting blown up in the streets, nothing's any good. So, are you having fun? Are you having fun?
I am. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on with Zoom. Yeah. So, anyhow, there we go.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on all this? The peace in the Middle East and whatnot?
I mean, it's improbable, but, you know, he got it done. I mean, what more can you say, really? I mean, by hook or by crook, it got done. So, you know, kudos to however it was done and whoever was able to get it done.
But don't you think it's horrible that we have to sit here through such peaceful times? I mean, unless there's war happening and we're droning people, we're killing as many people as Obama did with his drone strikes. So much so the U.S. actually in 1 year, 2015, ran out of bombs. Unless we're murdering people in Yemen, Libya. Oh, by the way, where we started, where the Obama administration's destabilization of Libya under Hillary Clinton also brought up what is happening now, which is a human trafficking slave trade in the main markets of Libya. Yeah, that's what Joe Biden's taking us back to, so we're going to be respected again in the world.
Yeah, you know, I mean, obviously we have very different definitions of respect.
And not to mention, you know, Hunter and you have the Chinese professor who's laughing. Yeah. Guess who got Hunter Biden started making all that Chinese money? And we've got top people in the top core. Oh, and now apparently there's emails possibly tying the soon-to-be Vice President Kamala Harris into some Chinese shenanigans. You have
That's,
Eric Swalwell, who's talking Democrat Eric Swalwell, who was one of the leading chargers to get rid of Trump and impeach him and all that. Apparently, he was betting himself down with a Chinese operative.
Again, I mean, I've said this before on the show multiple times. I've said this on this show multiple times that I would not be surprised if, it all comes out at some point that these Washington elites have sold this country out to China for 40, 50 years at this point. So none of this is surprising to me. I mean, I fully expect to see more and more of this kind of crap coming out. I'm not surprised in the least. So.
Well, like they say, sometimes, you get the leadership you deserve. And if in fact, it looks like our stream is going to end for some reason. YouTube is telling me.
Okay, well, before we get cut off, we should probably wrap it then.
Okay. All right, so hopefully we'll have a good show for you next week. We're working on having a guest in, which I think you'll find quite interesting. But until then, keep up the faith. Remember, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We're coming at you once a week. Journalist Charles W. Kim and Nicole M. Wells, the What's Cooking podcast, right here. Don't miss it.